You're tuned in to the Bleav in Arizona podcast. Hello, Bear Down Believers, and welcome into the show. I'm your host, Matt Reynolds. Happy homecoming week, Wildcats. It's bounce back time for the football team as they take on Colorado, 1 p.m. Arizona time at Arizona Stadium, national TV stage on Fox, 300-plus alumni in attendance. MC Hammer will be there to support his former backup dancer, Arizona running backs coach Alonzo Carter. And just the big stage altogether. Always fun to have homecoming, especially in the middle of October. And take a look at that forecast, Wildcats. 75 degrees, partly cloudy. Couldn't ask for a better mid-October day down here in the desert. Nice little cold front. I'll be down in Tucson for the game tomorrow. Looking forward to being down there and just looking forward to engaging with the Wildcat fans once again. It's so much fun. Home games are a blast. This should be a great atmosphere. A sellout, a recruit out. Saw Katie Joyner, the recruiting coordinator, on-campus recruiting coordinator for the Wildcats, tweet out that all walk-up recruiting tickets are full. So that place is going to be jam-packed. Should be a fun atmosphere at Arizona Stadium for homecoming. That's a 1 p.m. kickoff once again against Colorado on Fox. Coming up on the show, we'll talk a little bit about that matchup, a little bit how I liked the better approach, I think, to the press conferences from the Arizona coaching staff this week, and why I'm confident Arizona can go out there and play pretty well tomorrow. Whether that leads to a result, we'll see, but I think they're going to play a little bit better with a little bit more of a chip on their shoulder. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about why I think the Big 12 has now ascended to a two-bid league in the college football playoff chase, and we'll take our picks for every single game, not every single game, but every single Big 12 game of the college football weekend, and then, of course, the picks for the marquee games on the slate of this college football weekend. Before we get to all of our content on today's show, I want to remind you to please like and subscribe to the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, or wherever you get your podcasts, as well as my YouTube page at Matt_Reynoldson. Please click that subscribe button, leave a comment below. Would love to have you as a part of the show and, really just being involved with the content we have going on there. Also want to remind you that today's show brought to you, as it always is, by these guys. Melon hats, the most comfortable, versatile hats you will wear. Dress it up, dress it down. They're versatile. They hold their shape. They don't stink if you sweat in them, and I'm going to put that to the test today. Going out to Sabino Canyon for a hike this afternoon, enjoying this cooler weather, but I'm doing Blackett's Ridge, so we're going to sweat out there, and we're going to put this hat to the test. Newsflash, it's going to hold up. Get yourself one of these hats, melin.com. Check them out for yourself. You won't be disappointed seeing them all around, seeing them pop up more and more. That's melin.com, Melon hats. All right, let's get to the content on today's show. Arizona, 3-3 now on the year. I know the tenor around the football program is not really where you want it to be if you're a Wildcats diehard. 2 straight losses. The Texas Tech loss was frustrating, certainly, because Arizona didn't deliver at the key times of the game, which led eventually to coming back from down a lot, coming back from, I Bleav, taking a 19-18 lead late in the fourth quarter of that game, squandering it, missing opportunities late in that game, and then falling at home to Texas Tech in the Big 12 home opener. And then BYU, everything just crashed out. Jacob Manu gets ejected for a targeting penalty. The wheels start going in the opposite direction. Arizona loses the second quarter again, and then it just felt like things snowballed and snowballed and snowballed, and a 4-turnover game by the starting quarterback certainly didn't help matters in that one as well, and a 41-19 loss to a BYU team that looks pretty good. I'll talk a little bit about BYU when we talk about why the Big 12 looks like a two-bid league right now for the college football playoff, but I want to discuss Arizona and want to dial in on what this week has been different with Arizona. I think there's a different energy with this coaching staff now, and I think some could take that as desperation, but I'm choosing to take it as these guys know that their roster need a show of strength. Their roster needs a show of confidence in the press conference, full self-critical attitude, but also a confidence that they know these guys can get it done moving forward. I liked what I saw from Brent Brennan on Monday, setting the tone for the week, coming out with some punch, which, let's be honest, we don't often see him do. We don't see him come out with a whole lot of fire in the press conferences. He's usually laid back, semi-soft spoken in those press conferences, just kind of talking through ball in sort of a thought stream type way. He started that press conference with, I'm excited about this week. Ready. We're going to have the guys ready. Great opportunity with Colorado coming in here. Let's fill the stands and let's go get them. And that's the message he needed to strike coming into this week. But also, he was very self-critical of his team, very honest, very transparent in a way that I don't think coaches always are in this day and age. And, I don't think Arizona's staff is necessarily exempt to that mindset. So what we've seen from Arizona is sort of a reserved, we're not going to talk about injuries, we're not going to, give too much away in the media. And this week was sort of a change to answering the questions as they were asked. And here were a few of the highlights from Monday in Brent Brennan's press conference and what I saw of him exuding confidence, but also being self-critical that the process has not necessarily matched the results so far for the Wildcats.
I'm excited about this week. I'm excited about this opportunity that's ahead of us. Obviously, we're playing a really good Colorado team. They're well coached. They've got good players. They've got talent everywhere. They play hard. And so this is obviously a huge game for us. It's homecoming. We've got 300 football players coming back, or football alumni coming back, and then obviously all kinds of alumni coming back. It's going to be an incredible atmosphere here for game day, for this game. And I think when you think about all the good stuff that's happening with in terms of the support we're getting, the Zona Zoo sold out faster than it's ever sold out, and I think we have a chance to make Saturday's game a rocking, fun, exciting atmosphere for a hell of a football game. Well, I think in football you have to be in 1 week seasons, like you have to be focused on just this next thing, and it doesn't do anything for us to be looking backwards. We have to be mindful about what's ahead and what's coming. And so for our team, just the messaging has been, a year ago this team was 3-3, right, which is where we sit today. And the only difference between those things is how we feel about it, because of the expectations going into the season, right, like all that stuff. And so now all of a sudden it feels worse, right? And the good news is we have 6 opportunities left to play. Like, we have so much football left to play. And if we'll just focus on right now and the work that's required to give yourselves a chance to get the outcome you want, that's where we need to be.
All right, let's talk about this game. Arizona coming in as a slight favorite in this one, but as you might guess, most of the public money is on Colorado because Colorado's the name here in this matchup. And just ask their fans. They'll tell you. They'll tell you that the only reason anybody pays attention to anybody else in college football is because of Colorado. And let's fact check that a little bit. What was their most watched game of the year? Oh, that's right. It was getting smoked on national TV at Nebraska. Ooh, that was a fun one, wasn't it, Colorado fans? I digress. This week is about Arizona and Colorado, and it's a matchup that Arizona did not play well in last year. It was in the midst of their 7-game win streak to end the season last year after starting out 3-3. There's a point. There's a point. Looking at that, 3-3 right now is Arizona. Obviously, very different context last year. It looked different, especially coming off of a close loss to eventual national runner-up Washington and a USC team that was tough to beat on the road with the eventual first overall number 1 pick in Caleb Williams. But 3-3 is 3-3. You're only as good as your record says you are. So Arizona's technically at the same spot it was last year. Same conference record, everything like that. So, we'll see if We'll see if they can have some of the same turnaround they did last year in having that magical end to the 2023 season. It would take a lot more to turn it around this year, but I think, the bones of this roster are still there. So we'll talk about that a little bit. But last year, what we saw from this team was a group that gained some confidence with a couple home wins over ranked opponents, namely Oregon State and UCLA. Those were a couple of huge wins, built some momentum, and then they went on the road to Colorado. A very, very tough game in that spot and didn't play well. That was the worst game that Arizona played during the 7-game win streak last year. And Colorado pushed them, but then Arizona went back to the bread and butter of what it does well. And this is a team that still has the DNA of those comeback kids, of the guys that went out to Boulder and rallied, the same T-Mac that absolutely torched Travis Hunter. I will hear no different argument. Tetairoa McMillan absolutely torched Travis Hunter last year. I expect the same thing to happen this year. If Travis Hunter plays, we don't know. Deion's keeping that pretty close to the vest over there in Boulder. He said earlier this week that he will play, but late reports coming out of the Denver Post and coming out of Colorado football practice this week is that Hunter hasn't played. Hunter hasn't seen the field for a lot of the second half of practices this week. CU already on their way to Arizona right now. So we'll see if Travis Hunter, we'll see if number 12, the exceptional two-way player, is on the field for Colorado. But they had a lot of other injuries last week too. A lot of guys that went down late in that game in an emotional back and forth loss to Kansas State. So where's Colorado at health-wise in this game? We also don't know where Arizona is health-wise going into this game because the staff keeps injuries very close to the vest. We saw Bobo Takario Davis go down in that game. We saw Marquise Groves-Killebrew go down in that game. And Gunnar Maldonado and Traden Stukes also didn't play. Stukes out for the season, and we don't know the status on Maldonado right now. All that being said, if Arizona's down basically its entire secondary, this is going to be a long day at the office, unless Noah Fafita turns into vintage 2023 sling it all around the yard Noah Fafita. That's going to be tough. So we'll see which Arizona defenders play. I think if Takario Davis plays, that's a huge, huge win for Arizona because, quite frankly, he is the only defensive back on Arizona's roster that can lock up Travis Hunter. Takario Davis is a fringe first-round pick, and he is a guy with the size to physically match up against Hunter. Also can move around, can match up against a Jimmy Horn, a LeJontay Wester. I like what Marquise Groves-Killebrew has done since coming here. He is physical enough to push Horn and Wester off the line, get those guys uncomfortable, get them to adjust their routes, and make Shedeur make a throw. But if neither of those guys are playing, you're in a tough spot with guys like Emmanuel Carnley and figuring out the rest of your defensive back room. Demetrius Freeney probably will see extended amount of snaps, but Carnley and Freeney may have a little bit of a tough out against guys like Hunter, and even if Hunter doesn't play, guys like Horn and Wester, and certainly a quarterback like Shedeur Sanders, who certainly doesn't mind taking a few hits, which Arizona has known to bring with Trey Smith and this defensive line and the amount of pressures they get on that defensive line. Shedeur will stand in there to the very last second, and deliver a strike. It's what he does. It's what keeps him atop NFL draft boards right now, is just the ability to see things late and see things when plays break down. And I mean, no disrespect at all to Carnley and Freeney, but I don't trust them to cover for 6-7 seconds. I don't trust a lot of defensive backs in college football to cover for 6 or 7 seconds. Takario Davis may be the only one on this roster that has the tape that says, I have done this before. I have covered these guys before for this amount of time when plays break down. And Arizona's defensive backs will need to do that against Colorado. We'll see what the health status is. It'll all come out tomorrow. I don't think this game is a matter of health. I think this game is a matter of what does Arizona want the rest of its season to be? Is this a team that will come out and fight like their back is against the wall? Because it is. It is right now. Arizona's back is against the wall, and there is no mistaking that. 2 straight losses. Now, Arizona was good after 2 straight losses last year, reeled off a 7-game win streak. We all saw it. We saw the magic create, but there was momentum from those 2 losses. Right now, there's backwards momentum from these 2 losses, or at least backwards feeling from these 2 losses. But can Arizona respond in a game where it's technically favored by Vegas standards, but by the public betting standards, by the overall sentiment, Arizona is not favored in this game against Colorado. So can Arizona recapture that home dog mentality that made this team so special last year and run the ball up the gut and punch Colorado in the mouth and hit Shedeur Sanders and find the best player on the field in Teteroa McMillan and get him the football and have your quarterback make better decisions and coach your quarterback to make better decisions and have a game plan that's going to come out in front of this raucous crowd, in front of all your alumni, and in a huge stage for the program, on national TV, on homecoming, on a Chamber of Commerce day in Tucson, come out and get a football win and make sure Gentle Ben's is just as packed after the game as it is before the game. Can you capture the weekend? Because if not, we're turning the page to basketball. And then it'll be, can Arizona make a bowl game? This is, does Arizona still have a shot at getting into the Big 12 championship game? Because it technically does. It's an uphill battle not having the tiebreaker against conference undefeateds BYU and Texas Tech. But there's no tiebreaker loss against Kansas State. That was a non-conference game. It cannot be counted. Even though the teams played head-to-head, it cannot be counted in the conference standings. So if Arizona is tied against Kansas State, that head-to-head will not be a tiebreaker. It'll be something else. So Arizona still has a mathematical shot of making the Big 12 title game. They just need to play better to do it. They need to play a lot better. I think this staff recognizes that. You heard from Brent Brennan a couple minutes ago. I think the staff recognizes that. The players recognize it. And this is a real watershed moment for the 2024 Arizona Wildcats. Can you come home? Can you get a win against a talented team? And can you get back above 500 heading into 2 straight home games, another big one against West Virginia next week, and then reset? Get ready for some November football with Arizona football continuing to matter even during crossover season. That's what's at stake here. All right, well, whether Arizona does or doesn't get back into the picture of the Big 12 championship, I like where this league is right now in Arizona's first year in the conference. I think this league has now become, partly because of some dominoes falling in the other leagues and partly because just the strength of the conference in general and some not expected teams rising to the top, I think this has clearly become a two-bid league in the college football playoff picture. I think Kansas State is probably the best team in the conference, but they went out and they got smoked by BYU on the road. The Cougars have shown what they are as a defensive unit. They have a capable quarterback in Jake Retzlaff. They have a strong run game. They have dominant special teams. I mean, this is a BYU team that could win a couple games in the college football playoff. I think Kansas State is the most balanced, but there were a lot of ways in which they should have lost that game against Colorado. So we're looking at right now between BYU, Kansas State, Iowa State, and Texas Tech. And technically, I guess you can throw ASU and Cincinnati in there. And Colorado and West Virginia, both 2-1 in the league. Both the rest of the teams are 2 league losses. So they've kind of shifted to the back of the pack. You're looking at with the top 3 of BYU, Kansas State, and Iowa State, with Texas Tech at 3-0 in conference play right there in the hunt. You're looking at a 2-bid league right now, especially because of the non-conference wins that the Big 12 owns. Kansas State obviously played 10 Big 12 teams, but at the time of the win against Arizona, that's a strong win for Kansas State. BYU has maybe the most impressive in the conference, winning over SMU on the road in a tough place to play against a team that's now ranked on the fringe of the rankings right there, but still ranked and one of the major contenders in the ACC. BYU beat them, and people forget about that. Iowa State has a strong non-conference win over Big Ten power Iowa, also on the road. The non-conference resume of the Big 12 leads me to believe that this is a potential 2-bid league. Texas Tech, the lone black mark in that conversation because they did lose to Washington State. But things will sort themselves out. And there is absolutely a realistic possibility, from what I've seen from Texas Tech, that the Red Raiders could get the automatic bid. So if you're going through one of those 3 with the non-conference resume that BYU and Iowa State have, and the talent and overall balance and overall football caliber that a team like Kansas State has, I am certainly not ruling out a second Big 12 team going into the playoff as an at-large bid. Especially because when you look at the Big Ten right now and the results that shook out over last weekend, USC may have lost its last shot to be the Big Ten's 4th team in the college football playoff last week when it squandered that second half lead to Penn State. The top 3 of the Big Ten have crystallized, and we saw it on the field in Eugene with Ohio State and Oregon clearly the top 2 teams in that conference. And then we saw just down the road in LA, not just down the road, but you know what I mean. We saw just down the road in LA, Penn State show that they are a bona fide playoff contender, top 5 team with that impressive comeback over USC. But that's where the 3 ends. Indiana is the only team on the outside really looking in, but they've got kind of a murderer's row to end the season. The Hoosiers are 6-0 right now, but haven't really played anybody, and they've still got Nebraska left on the schedule. They've got Ohio State left on the schedule. multiple opportunities for the Hoosiers to trip up. Great story in their first year under a new head coach, but maybe not ready for that playoff discussion just yet. So it feels like the top three in the Big Ten have crystallized. USC and Michigan have significantly fallen off, and everybody else is just kind of chasing the rest of the pack in the Big Ten for that college football playoff spot. The SEC, continues to trip itself up, and we may see this weekend more teams trip themselves up, with Georgia playing at Texas and Alabama playing at Tennessee. LSU is the third best team in that conference right now. I put them over Alabama with what they've proven on the field in SEC play, especially with Bama's loss to Vandy. LSU, the third best team in the SEC, lost a neutral site non-conference game to USC, which is right now probably the sixth best team in the Big Ten, maybe the seventh. They're 1-3 in Big Ten play. That's not a great spot to be in. Not a great spot to be in if you're USC. And not a great loss to have on the resume if you're LSU. So that hurts the SEC right there. And even if your top four are right there and stay, how many more losses can Alabama take with that Vandy loss on the roster, with that Vandy loss on the docket? We don't know. How many more losses can Georgia take? They may not make the SEC championship game if they lose to Texas this weekend. So Texas, that clear top spot in the conference, and Tennessee kind of lurking right there. But there's a world in which the SEC doesn't get four teams as well. Certainly a world where it doesn't get five. Ole Miss has played its way out of the conversation. And to the ACC as well. Clemson looks much better. But what if Clemson drops one to Miami? And Miami is sitting there as the conference favorite. If Clemson drops it to Miami, Clemson is a two-loss team with their only two games on the big stage, a blowout loss against Georgia and a loss to Miami. Clemson's not making the college football playoff as an at-large at that point. They're just not. They don't have a Notre Dame game to potentially bolster the resume. That Clemson team would not make the college football playoff at 10-2. Miami has shown cracks in the foundation so far. Took a wild comeback to win games against Virginia Tech and Cal. They keep winning. They may have the best quarterback in the country in Cam Ward, but there are major cracks in the foundation with the ACC and with Miami being right there at the top. So the ACC could be a one-bid league. Notre Dame has that home loss to Northern Illinois. If the Irish take another loss, is a 10-2 Notre Dame team going to make the college football playoff? The Big 12 is in a great spot to get a second team in. I think it would be pushing it much too far to say a third team in. But, if there's a couple undefeated teams at the end of the season, if it's BYU and Iowa State, they play each other. But if it's, if it's those teams coming in at the end of the season, a finish with one team having one loss and kind of a round robin type thing, I could see a world where one may sneak into the 12th seed, the 11th seed of the 12th seed. We'll see. Big 12 has some darn impressive non-conference wins, and it's looked really good so far. And I think that this new iteration of the conference, this was the vision that Brett Yormark had. Doubt us if you will. Doubt us if you will, but we'll prove it on the field. We'll prove that we're a good football conference. And the Big 12 has certainly proven that so far. And I think you will see that reflected as well in December and January. All right, let's make some picks for the weekend. Loaded slate in the Big 12, starting off tonight with BYU and Oklahoma State. Won't pick that one in case you're listening on Saturday morning, maybe early Saturday afternoon before the U of A game. So don't want to get cold taked on a Friday night game. I do expect BYU to roll. Oklahoma State not playing very well, making a quarterback change. BYU continuing to roll, continuing to flex that defense. Another loaded night game atmosphere in Provo. Great atmosphere last week for the U of A game. Obviously, the Cougars knocked off Kansas State as well. I think they keep it rolling against the Pokes, but don't hold me to that because I don't want to get cold take tomorrow before even the start of the Saturday slate. All right, starting off our Saturday slate, ASU at Cincinnati. And the Sun Devils playing very well right now. Only one loss in the season on the road to Texas Tech. Year two of the Kenny Dillingham era seems to be going very well. And here's the quarterback situation that should really concern Sun Devil fans right now. Sam Leavitt, the starting quarterback, went down in the first half of that game last week against Utah. Ended up coming back in the second half of that game and leading the team to a win. Really, Camp Scatteroo did it, but leading the team to a win as the starting quarterback, but went back in with severe injury. So he is not able to go this week. He could miss as many as 2 to 4 weeks, Dillingham said earlier this week. So enter Jeff Sims, the now journeyman quarterback, former QB of Georgia Tech and last year at Nebraska, that has proven in his career to be a bit of a turnover machine. Ridiculous athlete, freak athlete, 6'4", 225 type build, runs in the mid fours for a 40-yard dash. I mean, the guy is exactly what you want as an athlete, as a coaching staff, if you're a coaching staff. I mean, this guy is electric on the field. The problem is you can't coach decisions altogether, and he, at times in his college career, at a lot of times, has been a very poor decision maker. So this is a tough spot for ASU right here, and Cincinnati comes in as a 5.5-point home favorite. Early kick out there at Cincy, 9 a.m. Arizona time, noon Cincinnati time. So that one's going to be a tough out for the Sun Devils. I think Cincinnati gets the win and the cover right here because I just frankly don't trust Jeff Sims. I'm buying ASU right now, which feels extremely weird to say. I'm buying the ASU train right now, but I think Sam Leavitt proved in camp, proved throughout the first half of this season that he is the quarterback to lead the Sun Devils and makes better decisions and takes care of the football and lets ASU lean on its run game. Even though you have the added run threat with Sims that you don't have with Leavitt, I just don't trust Sims to not turn the ball over. Saw it too many times last year at Nebraska. Saw it too many times at Georgia Tech. I think Cincinnati gets the win here. Gets a win by, I would say, by about 7 points. But I'd take the Bearcats to cover that 5.5 points and continue their sneaky good start to this 2024 season. Houston at Kansas. This has suddenly become a battle for last place in the Big 12. Kansas looks awful right now, but they're a 5.5-point favorite at home to Houston. Houston's got a salty defense, has held some good teams to some low scoring margins and look to be playing better, but I think Houston's pretty bad. Kansas looks to be going off the absolute rails, but I think Lance Leipold's a good coach. Obviously, Jalen Daniels, a good quarterback previously. Kansas looks like a mess. Houston does not have the roster to go win road games in this conference, but roll of the dice. I'm going to say Kansas minus 5.5 here. I just think at some point that coaching staff, that quarterback, that team with that talent has to turn it around because they were picked as one of the top 4 teams in the Big 12 in the preseason standings. And right now they're sitting at 1-5 with their season fully on the line. Baylor at Texas Tech is a really, really interesting line to me. And my friends and I do a college football pick 'em every week with the confidence and the ESPN, top 10 confidence picks. And in this game, Texas Tech was a 98% fan pick and Baylor was a 2% fan pick. So this line is a little confusing. It's Texas Tech minus 5.5 against a Baylor team that's absolutely reeling. I know it's an old Big 12 rivalry. I know it's an old Southwest rivalry. Two teams that know each other very well, two coaching staffs that know each other very well, a Baylor team that desperately needs a win. But are we really saying that Tech is going to drop one at home against this Baylor team, a 2-4 Baylor Bears team? I just don't see it. I mean, I know Baylor has some talent. They've got a pretty good quarterback, pretty dynamic quarterback, play a fun style, but Texas Tech is just a more sound football team. This team is 3-0 in Big 12 play. And yes, it would be the most Texas Tech thing ever to lose this game. I know. I watch Big 12 football. I know Texas Tech loses head scratcher games all the time, but I just don't see it in this spot. Texas Tech minus 5.5 feels like your easiest bet of the weekend. Probably over 59.5. I mean, taking the over on a Texas Tech game has usually paid out pretty well over the years. So I think Texas Tech is going to have the significant advantage in that one. Really interesting spot for Kansas State. Really interesting spot for West Virginia. Second straight road game for the Kitties in Manhattan. They will go out from one mountain range, the Rockies, to the other mountain range, the Appalachians. And West Virginia is a very tough place to play. Morgantown always brings the energy, that crowd. And it seems like the program's reeling a little bit. They're in a rough spot. Neil Brown on the hot seat, the head coach. I've talked to a lot of West Virginia fans. A few of them follow me on Twitter. We interact here and there. It just feels like the tenor of West Virginia fans is very tense right now. They could very much use a win over a very good Kansas State team. Tough spot for K-State, especially coming off a late night game out in Boulder. We'll see how they recovered physically from that game. I like Giddens, the running back. I like Avery Johnson. I think Kansas State's going to be able to control this game with the run game. They're only a 2.5-point favorite. This is a really, really, really tough game to pick. I'm going to go with the better team. I'm going to go with Kansas State, and West Virginia drops another head scratcher, another very, very close one at home, and falls to 3-4 on the season. UCF at Iowa State. Iowa State a 13.5-point favorite. The total in this game is 53.5. Look, UCF's offense has looked a mess. Iowa State's defense is elite. Probably among the elite in the conference, maybe the best, if not them, BYU, but this defense is incredible. That under 53.5 looks to be an absolute lock it in, go, put the mortgage on it, 100% play for Iowa State. I don't believe in UCF's offense right now. I don't necessarily believe that Iowa State can, score at will or run at will against this UCF team, but give me Iowa State getting the win. I'd probably avoid the 13.5 because this looks like it could be a tricky game, but that Iowa State defense shows strong. This total under 53.5 all day. And then TCU at Utah. This is a really big spot for Utah, especially after Cam Rising went out with the season-ending injury with his finger, turning back to Isaac Wilson as the quarterback. Night game at Utah, ESPN, Big 12 after dark. I think this TCU team has not proven a lot to me. They're kind of reeling. That blowout loss earlier in the season to SMU. They've dropped head scratcher games here and there. I don't think this is a spot where they go on the road at Utah and win. I think this is a get right game for Utah. So give me the Utes minus the 3.5. Obviously, we will wait on the Arizona-Colorado game until after my top 25 picks, but let's get it going with these top 25 picks and starting off the day with Miami at Louisville. I think this is a really interesting spot. Miami, a 5-point favorite on the road, morning game at Louisville. Probably the easiest point to play on the road. They get that noon window, the noon Eastern time window, 9 a.m. Arizona time. The crowd's not as ready. The crowd's not quite as juiced. So this may be not as easy of a spot for Louisville as it would be a night game to pick off a top 10 team, a top 6 team in Miami. But I really like when you give a guy like Jeff Brom, when you give a coach like Jeff Brom time to think about and scheme up and come up with ways to knock off a big opponent, he does it. We saw him do it at Purdue against Ohio State. And Louisville's got much more resources. Louisville's got a good quarterback in Tavis Shuck. They've got guys, and they've got athletes on the outside. They can run with Miami. It all comes down to whether Louisville can get enough stops to win this game. I think a few balls bounce the Cards' way, and undefeated Miami goes down against a very good Louisville team. Give me the Louisville money line, and the points took. Miami is a 5-point favorite in this game. Give me Louisville plus 5. I like the Cardinals at home to knock off the Canes. Nebraska at Indiana, I find this one extremely interesting just because these are two teams that are in good standing in the Big Ten. And Indiana off to a 6-0 start, their best start since the 1960s, I believe, as a program. New head coach Curt Cignetti has brought over a couple guys from James Madison and a transfer quarterback from Ohio, Curtis Rourke, that's playing really good football. They are top 20 units statistically on both offense and defense in scoring. This is the second highest scoring team in the nation, but they haven't really played anybody. So the best win probably right now at UCLA, at a 1-5 UCLA team. They beat the Bruins 42-13 earlier on in the year. They do have a home win over Maryland and a road win at Northwestern in Big Ten play, but this is without a doubt the toughest team Indiana will play to this point in the season. Nebraska has a win over Colorado, an overtime loss at home to Illinois, and then wins over Purdue and Rutgers. So they've had a little bit of a mixed bag as well, but they're 5-1. Indiana 6-0. What I like about this game is the quarterback matchup. Nebraska's true freshman Dylan Raiola had a rough outing against Rutgers. I think he bounces back against an Indiana defense that plays a ton of zone. And then I think Curtis Rourke is a guy who can really hit his guys on the outside. He's a cool, calm, and collected sixth-year senior. He'll be able to move the ball down the field. Expect some fireworks in this game, even though I like both defenses. But I think Nebraska's just better in the trenches. I think Nebraska has a better roster. So because of the start time of this game, if it was a night game, I might pick Indiana, but because of the start time of this game, give me Nebraska to go on the road and knock off the Hoosiers, handing Indiana their first loss. I got it like 28-20 in favor of Nebraska in that game. Mizzou in a big bounce back spot against an Auburn team that's Pexy. Mizzou is a 4.5-point favorite, still ranked in the top 20, even after that blowout loss to Texas A&M. They didn't get a chance to bounce back last week because they were on bye, but the Tigers need this one badly in a big spot against an Auburn team that's lost a lot of games in excruciating fashion. I wouldn't count out the Tigers here, the Auburn Tigers here, to come back and show that they can win a game on the road, to pick off a Missouri team that's had some bad feelings over the last couple of weeks. I like what Auburn brings to the table from a competitive standpoint, and I don't think Missouri is necessarily ready to bounce back, especially after that emotional loss at Texas A&M, to bounce back in a very big way right now. So give me Auburn to upset Mizzou on the road. Here's the big one. Alabama at Tennessee, the 2:30 game on ABC, 12:30 Arizona time. That's going to be a very, very fun game because I think Tennessee and their redshirt freshman quarterback, Nico Iamaleava, have an offense that just hasn't really unlocked the potential yet. And meanwhile, Alabama has had a few putrid defensive performances in the second half against Georgia, that loss against Vandy, and then the near loss against South Carolina. So what gives first in this game? Tennessee, the third Saturday in October, that's what they bill this rivalry as. Tennessee, to me, I think has a real opportunity in this spot to unlock some things on the offense. I know Bama has had a week to really, kind of lick its wounds on the defensive side of the ball. They're confident. They know what they are going in. But I think that this Tennessee team has something on offense and certainly that ball defense to really put Alabama in a tough spot in this game. Bama, a 3-point favorite. Give me the home dog. Give me the home dog in this game. And Tennessee beats Alabama for the second consecutive Neyland Stadium game. Third Saturday in October. This one goes to the Orange. Notre Dame at Georgia Tech. This is going to be a challenging spot for Notre Dame, but Georgia Tech, it was released today, will not have its starting quarterback, Haynes King. I think that really plays in Notre Dame's favor, that 12.5-point favorite right there. Georgia Tech's a tough team in the trenches. Obviously got that win to start the season against Florida State in Ireland when Florida State was supposed to be a top 10 team. But I like Notre Dame in this spot, covering the 12.5 on the road. Big win for Notre Dame. They jump into the top 10 after this week. Michigan at Illinois, a 24 versus 22 matchup. Now, this is a tough one to know exactly what to do with. Michigan, always great in the trenches. Illinois probably has the better quarterback in Luke Altmaier. And Illinois is a team that was up 27-3 against Purdue and then gave up a bunch of points and then was able to squeak out a game against Purdue 50-49 in overtime against a putrid Boilermaker team. So hard to know exactly what to make of this Illinois squad. We'll see how many fans get in the stands. Illini fans don't really care, but we'll see, especially with a big brand name like the defending national champions coming to town. I do like Illinois in this spot, even with Michigan as a 3.5-point favorite. I think Illinois is for real, and I think they get one of their biggest wins for the program in a very long time over Michigan. Give me Illinois as a home underdog right there. Texas A&M rolls over Mississippi State. I think Mississippi State is the worst team in the SEC. LSU, Arkansas remains very interesting. I think this is an easy spot for Arkansas to potentially pick off this LSU team. Arkansas already with a home win over Tennessee. LSU coming off that big emotional overtime win over Ole Miss. LSU having to go on the road. Tough to beat the Hogs there. Traditional SEC rivalry, or at least semi-traditional SEC rivalry. That's a fun spot for the Hogs. I would love to be in that stadium this weekend. I think Arkansas knocks them off a night game on ESPN. And then the big one, top 5 matchup in Austin, Georgia and Texas. How much did Georgia learn from that loss to Alabama? Because things certainly couldn't have gone worse than they did in the first half of that game against the Crimson Tide. We saw it. How much did Georgia win, or how much did Georgia glean from that game? Now, Texas hasn't played the toughest of schedules, but they do have a dominant road win over Michigan, and they do have a dominant rivalry win over Oklahoma. This is a team that's great on the line of scrimmage. This is a team that has 2 quarterbacks. This team that has a good running game, which is surprising because they almost lost their top 2 running backs in fall camp, did lose their projected starting running back in CJ Baxter. But right now, this looks like the best team in the sport, and Georgia's in a tough spot. We'll see if that Georgia defense bounces back against a team that may not have the pure dynamic athletes of like a Jalen Milroe and a Ryan Williams, which is what really hurt Georgia down the stretch in that game again in Tuscaloosa. I think this is going to be a little bit more of a rock fight. I don't think this is going to be a 38-35 game. Give me like a 23-20 game. I'll take Texas. I won't take the 5. I will not take the 5 points in this game. That is a somewhat ballooned line, and I think people are doubting that Georgia still has one of the best rosters in the sport of college football. Give me Texas. Give me a Georgia cover. That should be an extremely fun game. The primetime stage in Austin, top 5 matchup on ABC. All right, let's go to the big one. The big one of the week, Arizona and Colorado, 1 p.m. kickoff at Arizona Stadium. Homecoming for the U of A. The Wildcats taking on the Buffaloes. Arizona has won the last 2 games against Colorado the past 2 years. So we'll see if they can make it 3 straight against the Buffaloes once again. Look, this is a squad that comes in with a lot of confidence and brings a lot of confidence to every game. Arizona right now, maybe not having the most confidence, maybe not being in a spot where they feel super comfortable about where they are direction-wise in the program. This comes down to whether Arizona shows that dog mentality, whether Arizona realizes that they have a quarterback that's seen it all and probably the best player on the field in wide receiver Tetairoa McMillan. We don't know if Travis Hunter will play. We don't know if Tacario Davis will play. We don't know if Gunnar Maldonado will play or Marquise Groves-Killebrew. We don't even really know if some of these Colorado wide receivers will play. We could see a depleted effort. But what we will see for sure is Noah Fifita versus Shedeur Sanders, and which one stands in and rallies his team better throughout this game. Arizona has shown glimpses of good football and glimpses of awful football. But will Arizona be able to capture the magic, the energy of a team that went on this run last year from 3-3 to 10-3? Jacob Manu is back. He rested all week last week after being thrown out with that terrible targeting penalty. You think Jacob Manu is itching to get out on that field? The leader of the defense, ready to say, we're not giving up 34 points again. 41 was on the board last week, but 1 was a pick 6. We're not giving up 34 points this week. Not against this team, not right now. I don't care about the injuries in the secondary. Guys need to step up. You don't think Dwayne Aquina, with his 43 years of coaching experience, is ready to create a back-end scheme that's going to confuse the absolute heck out of Shedeur Sanders? This is a good spot for Arizona. This is a spot where Arizona needs to lock in, get in the game, and just show the grit of a team that's ready to turn this season around. I'm not super convicted either way on this game. I think it's going to be a darn good football game. I think it's going to be a really entertaining football game. And I think it could come down to a guy like Tyler Loop. I hope it doesn't, for Arizona's sake. I hope they can finish drives. But right now, I think this could be a game that comes down to Tyler Loop. And in the end analysis, in a home game, in a sold-out crowd, in a raucous atmosphere, give me the 2nd straight year with a Tyler Loop game winner over Colorado. 34-31, Arizona figures out the offense. They get just enough stops on defense and a couple clutch field goals at the end of each half by Tyler Loop. Win the Wildcats the game in Tucson, and it's a party for homecoming weekend. 75 and sunny tomorrow. Regardless of the result, enjoy it. I'll be there in Tucson, hoping to interact with some of you, the fans, and I'm wearing my melon hat to Sabino Canyon a little bit later today. All right, that'll do it for this edition of the Bleav in Arizona podcast. Please remember to like and subscribe to the show, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, tune in wherever you get your podcasts, my YouTube page at Matt_Reynoldsson as well. Have a great weekend. Enjoy homecoming and bear down.